we find ourselves in this great transition between the years 2023 and 2025 is that period. To be fair, it's a 2-year period. Pluto finds its way between Capricorn and Aquarius. So we're right in the middle of it right now, this second ingress, if you will. And to be fair, when we're thinking about these outer planets, particularly Pluto, which is the outerest of the outer, it moves the slowest. We can't think of these retrograde periods in the same way because Pluto probably spends half of its existence in a retrograde motion. Not at all like Mercury, who darts back and forth retrograding 3 times roughly a year, but moves very quickly. And so when it retrogrades, there's a distinct difference. We feel it. That's why it's just widely talked about thing in the world and on the streets is Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde, Mercury retrograde. All the wandering stars retrograde, have their retrograde cycles, and Pluto is practically moving backwards half the time. So this is important. We're on God's time here. And it's interesting because as slow and dense as we are in the 3D, in our linear fashion, thinking of everything as before, during, and after, left, right, up, down, and beginning, middle, end, which just we can't help because this is where we are. We still think that a day and a week and a year is a long time because life is a grind and these things seem to last a long time, particularly when they're important. And this 2-year period seems like an eternity for a planet to change signs. And Pluto does what it does because as the prima mobile, the outermost, there is no turning back. There is no turning back once Pluto, the street cleaner, which is the name that I gave to it 15, 20 years ago. Pluto's the street cleaner. I remember writing a piece of music back then called Pluto's Approach. And there were these sounds in it that reminded me of that sound. I used to live in a big city. I used to live in New Orleans. And I used to work late nights in the French Quarter. I had a job for a brief time down there. And those street cleaners would come in at a certain time. If it was Saturday night and at midnight on Sunday morning, certain things shut down and certain streets shut down. And those street cleaners, they come and they say, shh. There's a sense of run the other direction. You have no choice, which in a Plutonic sense, in an astrological sense, energetic sense, in this case, we're talking about the fate, destiny, the final card that the mind of God has to play in our lives to set us on the right path again. Our final chance to hear the message. Wherever Pluto is traversing in our particular area of our lives, particular area of our makeup. And as our makeup is written into our DNA, it is thusly written into the stars exactly the same way. It's right there. And it is imprinted on our skin in tiny blemishes and dots and bumps and skin anomalies. And if you were to lay this human skin out flat and lay the firmament out flat, that would be the imprint the moment you're born. And the outermost wandering star, Pluto, with its atomic force, the densest, known to be the densest of all of the so-called planets. And to some astronomers still only considered to be a dwarf or whatever they call it. This is all energy anyway. And astronomers have their way of describing things, and the ancients had their way of describing things. They don't always match up. In fact, they often don't. Nonetheless, as Pluto became a greater part of the pantheon in the modern human civilization, it came to be understood as the densest of all of these so-called planets. Just as much density and heaviness as could be crammed into a ball, a tiny marble, if you will, in the sky. And we've talked about before how that represents the as above, so below inverse energy inside ourselves, the deep, deep, deep atomic personal power that we're trying to tap into. The forces in the world, and let's just get right to this point. The forces in the world, the most common card that they play is to take us out of our own personal power. And that is a much easier way, it is a much more clever tactic, let's put it that way. Because they don't have to lift as many fingers to do that. They don't have to take us by force. They just have us believing that we need someone to control us, or that we don't have any personal power. If they can keep us ignorant of our own personal power, then they don't have to take us by force. They've already taken us in the mind and in our understanding. And this is what the forces that govern the world do. And let's be fair, the world is something different than the earth. And you'll hear me talk about this a lot. Those two words are different things. The earth is Mama Gaia, part of the divine family. The world is an imposition. And to be perfectly fair, the devil, for lack of a better term, runs that world. And this is the 3D that we find ourselves in. This left, right, up, down, good, evil, dark, and light existence where we're trying to sort this out and come back to God, our divine nature. Pluto, the last bastion of karmic judgment, is there for God and God's angels to play its final card to teach us the lesson that we have not yet learned about the world and about its difference from the earth and about the forces of darkness that wander and work within it, in that world, right upon the face of the earth. See, we are born as human souls. We're born into the flesh of the earth, into the three-dimensional, to come and learn lessons, to grow and enhance and advance the rank of our soul in God's eternity. And the forces of darkness that infiltrate the power structures of the world are there to undermine that connection. If we link into that connection, we will rediscover and we will reharness our own personal power, and it is atomic. Our power is down to the very atom itself. It is plutonic, if you will. And the planet Pluto, when it moves, it is dealing with our atoms, trying to stir them up and shake that deep personal power within from the atomic level out. But it must swing its wrecking ball into our lives and show us where we simply have gone astray. And we all do it. We all do it every day. When Pluto changes signs, and it takes a 2-year period, usually some long period, because as I said before, it stays in retrograde for a long time. It comes back and forth and back and forth. And that's what it's doing. It's sitting at 0 degrees roughly right now of Aquarius, just crossing into the new sign. And it's going to retrograde back in September of 2024 this year for a couple months, dip back into Capricorn a little bit, hover around, and finally turn back around. This is what all planets do, and Pluto has a dramatic way of doing it because it moves so slowly. It literally takes 250 some odd years for it to make its way all the way around the firmament, which is unbelievable. And its 250-year period marks a small piece of the pie of the grand cycle. When Pluto makes its way back to Aquarius, it marks a very important landmark point. We spoke of this a little bit in one of the earlier episodes, that and astrologers around the world agree that this is marking a point in human history where we are turning a corner in the great cycle of time. And a particular 250-year chunk has been bitten out of that dark age. Pluto's transit through Capricorn, marking the atomic breakdown, slow disintegration of the power structures in the world. And as I've spoken of before in previous episodes, we see evidence of this, but we don't see them crumbling to the ground just yet. We see them, in a way, we see them clutching and grasping for dear life in a way. If you look at the behavior of the media, for example, how it is seemingly just grasping at whatever lie they can hold on to. And as more and more people wake up to the lie of what's going on in that. And you could point to other institutions. We don't have to go into detail. It's not really that kind of talk. But this is going to be reflected in the world. And I remember I said to a close friend a couple years ago, because I've been talking about Pluto for a long time. And I remember saying that very soon the hand of God is going to come down. Every few thousand years, God has to say, oh, dadgummit, y'all, I gave you free will again like an idiot, and now I got to come straighten out. And here we go. And in a 250-year period, maybe Pluto is the signal. Maybe it's the harbinger, if that's the right word, of God raising the back of his hand. I got to come down and sweep things up so we can move forward and evolve the soul of humanity into eternity. And we have to purge away some problems first. We have to purge away some hurt and some murder and some death and some hate and some apathy and some fear and some bloodshed and some misunderstanding and some arrogance and some ignorance. We got to purge a lot of stuff. Pluto is here. It's the street cleaner. It's midnight, Saturday in New Orleans, and you better run for the sidewalk because the street cleaner is coming. When we face this in our own lives, in our personal selves, in our soul, when we meditate on this deep in our heart, it can give us power, and it can give us peace. We have to face the things we can't control. We have to face them and accept them. And we have to seek to serve in those places where we know we can't control. We have to find a way to serve it somehow. And in those moments that we know we can control, and there is so much more in our lives from the moment we wake up that we can control that we don't do as good of a job at controlling as we can. We're all guilty of this. And of course, it starts with the things we put in our body, the things we put in our mind, and the things we do with our time and our eyes and our ears and our voices. It starts there. We have so much more control over that than we realize. The world makes us think and wants us to think that we don't. We're going to be at the whims of whatever trend and whatever fad and whatever celebrity they're going to shove at us, or whatever distraction. No, we have control over that more than we realize. And Pluto wants to show us again inside and in the world, as the institutions of the world start to run riot, seeming more silly and ridiculous as they do. Pluto's going to show us. The street cleaner is on its way. And there is a lot to rejoice in that. We got to be strong. We got to be strong and aware and run for the sidewalks